Who are you? It's a question so simple that it almost feels childish. A question we've been answering since we could first speak. At school, we raise our hands and declare, "I'm Emma. I'm 6 years old. I like to draw." Later, in job interviews or on social media profiles, the answers become more polished. "I'm a marketing manager. I'm a father. I'm a traveler. I'm a survivor." We wear these words like name tags, believing they tell the world who we are. But pause for a moment, really pause, and let that question sink deeper. Who are you when there's no one to impress? When there's no role to perform, no audience to convince? At first, the mind scrambles for something to hold on to. It offers familiar titles and traits, as if reaching into a box of old souvenirs. But sit quietly a little longer, and something unexpected happens. The answers start to slip through your fingers. The labels, the proud ones and the painful ones, begin to lose their solidity. They float away like mist rising from a river at dawn. And what remains is not a sharper definition, but a kind of luminous uncertainty. A vastness you can't quite label. A quietness that feels more honest than any title you've ever claimed. Could it be that what we call the self is not a rock-solid thing to be found, but a story we've been telling ourselves, moment by moment? If that's true, then maybe the search for identity, the effort to define, defend, and polish who we are, has been missing the deeper invitation all along. Today, we begin a different kind of journey. Not a journey of adding more, not striving to become someone special, or impressive, or perfect, but a journey of seeing, of laying down the heavy burden of self-definition, and stepping into something lighter, wider, freer. We are not here to erase who we are. We are here to touch the living mystery that breathes beneath all the labels. The part of us that existed before we had words to describe ourselves. The part that remains even when every title, every success, and every failure has fallen away. This is not about philosophy for its own sake. It's not about abstract ideas or clever arguments. It's about touching something real, something that was never lost, only hidden behind layers of habit and fear. And it begins with one daring question, asked with an open heart. If I stop defining myself, what remains? Chapter 1. The Trap of Self-Definition. From the earliest days of life, almost without noticing, we are pulled into a silent project, the construction of a self. It begins innocently. What do you want to be when you grow up? A teacher asks, and we answer with bright eyes. A doctor, an astronaut, a singer. At first, it feels playful, a way of exploring possibilities. But slowly, subtly, the question changes. It becomes not just about what we will do, but who we are expected to be. We start hearing different questions. What makes you special? What's your passion? What defines you? And so, brick by brick, label by label, we build a house called me. Some of the bricks are easy to celebrate. I am kind. I am ambitious. I am strong. Others are heavier, darker. I am broken. I am a failure. I am not enough. Whether bright or heavy, these labels start to shape the walls we live inside. They tell us where we can go and where we cannot. At first, it seems like safety, a clear identity, a sense of place. But over time, the walls grow narrower. They begin to press against us. We realize we are not living freely. We are living to maintain an image. Because every identity we build demands upkeep. If I'm the strong one, I must never show weakness. If I'm the funny one, I must keep laughing even when my heart is heavy. If I'm the successful one, I must hide every stumble, every failure. Life becomes a performance, and performances are exhausting. What was once a tool for connection, a way of moving through the world, becomes a burden we can no longer set down. Psychologists call this self-referential processing, a constant, looping mental activity where we evaluate ourselves, measure ourselves, compare ourselves. Am I living up to who I'm supposed to be? Am I winning enough approval to validate my existence? Even our moments of joy get folded into the project of self-maintenance. A quiet morning becomes an Instagram post. A kind gesture becomes a badge of being a good person. The Buddha saw this trap with crystal clarity. He taught that the suffering we experience is not merely because things change, but because we cling to the idea that we are something fixed, solid, separate. He pointed to the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, not as building blocks of a permanent self, but as impermanent processes like waves in the ocean. To cling to any one of them as me is to guarantee confusion and pain. Imagine believing you are the successful one, only to lose your job. The loss isn't just practical, it's existential. If I'm not successful, then who am I? Or seeing yourself as the strong one, only to fall ill. Suddenly, every crack feels like an identity crisis. We do not just grieve what we lose. We grieve who we thought we were. And yet, even when we see the exhaustion, we find it hard to stop, because the mind has been trained for so long to ask, who am I? And to believe that the answer must be solid and satisfying. The mind seeks security through definition, through identity, through control. But the deeper truth, whispered quietly through the Dharma, is this. Security built on what is impermanent can never bring peace. A self built on ever-changing conditions must be endlessly defended and endlessly feared to lose. The Buddha's invitation is radically different. He does not ask us to build a better self. He does not ask us to polish the ego until it shines. He simply invites us to see that the me we are working so hard to protect is like a reflection in a river, appearing, shifting, dissolving. There is form, but no unchanging body. There is feeling, but no permanent feeler. There is thought, but no thinker standing apart from the thought. Life flows. We suffer only when we demand it to freeze. To stop defining ourselves is not to vanish. It is to move in harmony with the truth of impermanence, to become less like a fortress and more like the open sky. This doesn't mean rejecting our experiences, our love, our talents, our dreams. It means holding them lightly, wearing them like loose garments, rather than armor pressed against the skin. In this space of looseness, something unexpected appears. Flexibility, compassion, freedom. You are not bound to yesterday's story. You are not imprisoned by tomorrow's fear. You are not the title you were given, nor the wound you endured. You are the living awareness in which all these stories come and go. And when you begin to taste this freedom, even for a moment, a new question starts to arise. If I no longer need to define myself, what becomes possible? Chapter 2. The Illusion of Self, Psychology and the Mind's Storytelling Habit. When we hear that the self is an illusion, something deep inside resists. It feels unsettling, even threatening, because the I feels so real, so constant, so obvious. How could it be anything but true? And yet, both ancient wisdom and modern science quietly agree. The self we cling to is not a fixed object. It is a story, constantly being woven by the mind. In Buddhist teachings, this process is called sankhara, the ceaseless mental formations that shape our perception of reality. In psychology and neuroscience, similar insights have emerged. The brain, it turns out, is less like a mirror and more like a storyteller. Consider this. Every day, your mind receives a flood of raw data. Sights, sounds, smells, touches, memories, emotions. And out of this overwhelming chaos, it must create order. It stitches these fragments together into a coherent narrative. This is happening to me. I am feeling this. I am choosing that. Without this narrative stitching, the world would seem meaningless, confusing, overwhelming. In this sense, the storyteller mind is not the enemy. It is an evolutionary gift, helping us navigate the world. But the trouble begins when we forget that it's just a story, when we believe the story too tightly, when we confuse the narrator's voice with our true nature. Imagine walking into a room where someone glances away as you enter. Instantly, without conscious effort, a thought forms. They're upset with me. I must have done something wrong. Notice how the mind does not say, a person looked away. It immediately creates a self-referential meaning. I am the cause. I am the problem. This happens countless times each day. Scrolling through social media and feeling inadequate. Hearing a comment and assuming it's criticism. Remembering a failure and rewriting the entire story of who we are. The mind's narrator is active, busy, relentless. In cognitive neuroscience, researchers have identified a structure called the default mode network, a set of brain regions that activates when we are not focused on the outside world, but turn inward towards self-referential thinking. It is the hum of the mind's self-story engine. Chris Niebauer, a cognitive scientist, describes it this way. The left hemisphere of the brain behaves like a narrator, constantly interpreting experience. When faced with random events or emotions, it invents a story to explain them. If the mind sees sadness, it says, I am sad because I failed. If the mind feels fear, it says, I am afraid because I'm not strong enough. But what if these stories are only partial truths? What if sadness sometimes just arises because life is fragile? What if fear sometimes just visits without any deeper defect in us? The mind craves certainty. It craves continuity. It wants to weave a neat thread called me through the changing river of experience. But reality is more fluid than that. From a Buddhist perspective, clinging to these narratives is a form of ignorance, a blindness to the real nature of existence, impermanent, interconnected, and empty of fixed self. In the famous metaphor of the chariot, the Buddha asked, if you take apart the wheels, the axles, the seat, where is the chariot? Likewise, if you examine body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, consciousness, where is the fixed self? There is walking, but no permanent walker. There is thinking, but no unchanging thinker. There is living, breathing, sensing, but not a static entity orchestrating it all from behind the scenes. This realization is not meant to lead to despair. It leads to liberation. Because when we see that the self is a flowing process, not a frozen object, we no longer have to defend it so fiercely. We no longer have to prove our worth through endless achievement. We no longer have to panic when our image cracks. We can live more lightly, more fluidly, more truthfully. Imagine moving through life without needing to constantly explain yourself, to yourself or to others. Imagine experiencing sadness without adding a story of failure, or feeling joy without immediately fearing its loss. Without the heavy burden of self-narration, emotions arise and pass like weather. Experiences touch us and move through us. Life becomes less like a courtroom where we are constantly on trial, and more like a river we are free to swim in. This doesn't mean becoming passive or detached. It means engaging with life more directly, without the constant distortion of egoic interpretation. When someone frowns at you, you don't need to spiral into self-blame. You can simply notice, a frown appeared. When success comes, you can enjoy it without attaching your worth to it. When failure happens, you can learn without collapsing into shame. This is not numbness. It is clarity. In Buddhism, this capacity to see thoughts and emotions as passing phenomena is called mindfulness. Sati. It is the skill of noticing experience without grasping it. Modern therapies like acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, echo this wisdom, encouraging us to notice our thoughts, thank them for their service, and then return to presence, without being ruled by them. In this way, mindfulness is not about controlling thoughts. It's about disidentifying from them. You are not the narrator. You are not the story. You are the open space in which stories arise and dissolve. There is an old Zen teaching. The mind is like a clear mirror, brightly reflecting everything without holding on. When clouds pass through the sky does not resist. It does not try to clutch the clouds, nor push them away. It simply allows. What if we could live like that? Allowing thoughts to come and go without building a permanent house out of them. Allowing identities to appear and fade without fighting or clinging. In that spaciousness, something remarkable happens. Compassion deepens, because when we stop being so obsessed with our own image, we have more space to see the suffering and beauty of others. Creativity flourishes, because when we are not trapped inside a rigid story of who we must be, new possibilities emerge. Peace expands, because the endless work of self-maintenance softens, and what remains is simply being. The Buddha spoke of this as freedom from the conceit of I am, not the erasure of experience, but the release of grasping. You still have a name. You still feel joy and sadness. You still dream, strive, love, but you live it all more lightly, more freely, without needing to define yourself at every step. The illusion of self is not evil. It is simply a habit we can see through gently and compassionately. And seeing through it does not end life. It opens it. It reveals a deeper kind of belonging, not as a separate self struggling for identity, but as a living part of a great, breathing wholeness. When we glimpse this, even for a moment, a new kind of question arises. If the I is not a fixed thing, then who, or what, is truly living this life? The answer is not something we can capture in words. It is something we experience, directly and silently, and it is closer to you than your own breath. Chapter 3. The Misunderstood Truth of Non-Self. For many who first encounter the Buddhist teaching of non-self, anatta, it feels like a cold slap against everything we instinctively believe. If there is no self, the mind protests. Then who am I? Do I even exist? This reaction is natural, because for so long, we have been taught, by culture, by family, by our own inner narrators, that the self is the most real, the most precious thing we possess. But the Buddha's insight into non-self is not a denial of your existence. It is an invitation to experience existence more deeply, more truthfully, than you ever have before. Let's begin by clearing away the common misunderstandings. Misunderstanding 1. Non-self means I don't exist. When Buddhism speaks of non-self, it is not saying you are an illusion. It is saying that the idea of a fixed, separate, unchanging entity at the center of experience is an illusion. You exist. You feel joy and sorrow. You breathe. You hope. You love. But what you call you is not a solid statue, unmoving and eternal. It is a living river, dynamic, responsive, flowing. At any given moment, what you experience as yourself is a composite of sensations, perceptions, emotions, thoughts, and consciousness. These elements arise and pass, shift and dance, continuously. You are not the cloud. You are the sky in which clouds appear and dissolve. Seeing this does not erase you. It frees you from clinging to a brittle self-image. It opens a more spacious way of being, where you can move with life, rather than constantly defending a false center. Misunderstanding 2. I must destroy my ego. Another common trap. Thinking that to realize non-self, we must violently destroy the ego, crush all personality, reject all individuality. But in truth, the effort to annihilate the ego often only makes it stronger. It turns the ego into a subtle enemy, constantly lurking, waiting to sabotage us. The Buddha did not teach self-hatred. He did not teach self-erasure. He taught seeing clearly, seeing that what we call ego, our preferences, our habits, our quirks, is simply a functional aspect of mind, useful in its place, but dangerous when mistaken for the whole of who we are. A Zen saying captures this wisdom beautifully. Don't try to get rid of the ego. Just don't invite it to tea. You don't need to fight the ego. You don't need to worship it, either. You simply need to recognize it for what it is. A tool, not a master. A passing pattern, not a permanent truth. When you stop making ego the center of gravity, life softens. You smile more easily. You forgive more quickly. You adapt without losing your center. Misunderstanding 3. If everything is empty, then nothing matters. Perhaps the most dangerous misunderstanding is the nihilistic one. If the self is empty, if all is impermanent, then why bother? Why care? But true non-self is not an excuse for apathy. It is a pathway to profound engagement with life. When you understand that no moment can be clung to, you cherish it more. When you see that no being is isolated, you feel their joy and suffering more intimately. You don't love less because love is impermanent. You love more fiercely, knowing that every moment is precious. You don't act with less integrity because you have no fixed identity to protect. You act with greater sincerity because action arises from compassion, not from self-defense. The Buddha did not teach emptiness as despair. He taught emptiness as freedom. Freedom from the exhausting project of maintaining an identity. Freedom from the fears that chain us to fixed ideas. Freedom to meet life as it actually is, vibrant, fleeting, astonishing. The true gift of non-self. Non-self is not about becoming less human. It is about becoming more fully alive. When you are not trapped in defending who you are, you become open to all that you can be. When you are not obsessed with maintaining a label, the wise one, the broken one, the successful one, you can actually experience life with fresh eyes. You can be strong when strength is needed. You can be vulnerable when vulnerability is true. You can be silent, joyful, grieving, courageous, without betraying any fixed idea of yourself. This is not chaos. This is freedom. Freedom to respond authentically to each unfolding moment. Freedom to love without needing to possess. Freedom to serve without needing recognition. Freedom to breathe, to move, to live, not as a rigid statue, but as a living current, dancing with the currents of life. A new way of being. When the Buddha taught that there is no fixed self, he was not erasing meaning. He was clearing the path for a deeper, more compassionate meaning. You are not a frozen label. You are not the sum total of your past mistakes or triumphs. You are this living, breathing mystery, ever-changing, ever-arising, ever connected to the great whole. When you stop clutching at the mirage of a solid self, you begin to participate more fully in the miracle of life itself. You are not diminished. You are expanded. You are not erased. You are liberated. And from that space of liberation, a new kind of presence emerges. Quiet, grounded, radiant. A presence that does not need to define itself to exist. A presence that is enough, just as it is. Chapter 4. Living without labels. How to be free without losing yourself. When we loosen our grip on the rigid idea of self, a new question quietly arises. If I stop defining myself, how do I live? Without a title, a role, a label to cling to, what guides me? This fear is understandable. For so long, the structure of self-definition has been our compass. Without it, the mind worries we might drift aimlessly, like a ship without a rudder. But the truth is, living without labels does not leave us empty. It leaves us free. Free to respond to life directly, not through the filter of who we think we are supposed to be. Free to act from intention rather than from identity. The burden of carrying labels. Every label we carry, even the ones we wear with pride, comes with a weight. To be the responsible one means we may neglect our own needs in order to live up to the image. To be the strong one often means suffering silently, even when help is needed. To be the compassionate one can turn into a cage of endless self-sacrifice, leaving little space for boundaries or rest. Labels start as tools for communication, but when we internalize them too deeply, they become cages. Subtle, invisible, but powerfully limiting. We begin to perform our lives instead of living them. We react according to our script rather than the reality of the present moment. And in doing so, we lose touch with the tender, responsive, spontaneous aliveness that is our true nature. The gentle power of awareness. Living without labels does not mean forgetting who we are. It means returning to a deeper awareness. An awareness that notices roles and patterns without being confined by them. It starts very simply, by noticing. You notice the thought arise. I always mess things up. And instead of accepting it as fact, you recognize. This is a thought. It is passing through my mind. You notice the impulse to say, I'm not good at this, before even trying, and gently pause. You begin to catch the small, habitual moments where identity tries to tighten around you. And instead of grabbing hold, you breathe. You smile, if you can. You let the thought drift away like a cloud across the sky. Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh offered this luminous reminder. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness of your thoughts. This shift, from identification to observation, is subtle, but it changes everything. It turns rigidness into flexibility, self-criticism into curiosity, performance into presence, living by intention, not by identity. If we are not guided by rigid identities, what leads us? Intention. Instead of asking, who am I? We begin to ask, what am I practicing today? Am I practicing kindness? Am I practicing patience? Am I practicing courage? Am I practicing honesty? These questions are alive. They invite responsiveness instead of rigidity. You do not need to be a generous person to practice generosity. You do not need to be a wise person to practice wisdom. You simply choose, moment by moment, to align your actions with the values that matter most to you. This way of living is dynamic, flexible, deeply humane. It allows you to adapt, to grow, to change, without feeling like you are betraying some fixed idea of who you are supposed to be. It honors the truth that we are verbs, not nouns. Breathing, moving, feeling, responding. The spaciousness of presence. When you stop clinging to labels, you don't become less real. You become more real. You laugh without wondering if laughter fits your image. You cry without shame when sorrow comes. You speak the truth without calculating how it will sculpt your reputation. You live from presence, not performance. There is a spaciousness that arises, a feeling of room inside your heart, inside your mind. You find that you can hold joy and grief together, strength and vulnerability together, silence and action together. You are no longer a character trapped inside a story. You are the open space in which the story unfolds. And because of that, life becomes more vivid, more tender, more precious. the morning sunlight on your face, the sound of rain against the roof, the quiet touch of a friend's hand. These moments no longer need to be captured, posted, analyzed, compared. They can simply be lived. The Buddha's invitation, freedom here and now. The Buddha taught that liberation is not found by becoming someone new, but by seeing clearly what has always been here. He did not promise that you would become a perfect being. He promised that you could wake up from the exhausting dream of perfection. He pointed not to a destination far away, but to a freedom available here, now, in this very breath. A freedom that does not require you to add anything, only to let go of what you were never meant to carry. You do not need to become someone else. You do not need to polish yourself into a flawless image. You only need to remember, you are not the name tags you wear. You are not the stories you were told. You are not even the stories you tell yourself. You are the living presence beneath it all. Open, responsive, alive. A quiet revolution. Each time you choose awareness over automatic identity, you participate in a quiet revolution. Each time you forgive yourself for being human, you loosen the chains of rigid selfhood. Each time you ask, not who am I, but what is needed now, you step closer to true freedom. Living without labels is not about erasing your uniqueness. It is about letting your uniqueness breathe, move, evolve, without forcing it into a narrow mold. It is about trusting that you are vast enough to contain multitudes, strong enough to change, tender enough to be real. It is about walking lightly on the earth, not because you have no self, but because you have remembered that your true self was never a fixed object. It was always a living mystery, inviting you not to define it, but to dance with it. And in that dance, you find something more precious than certainty. You find life itself. Each time you pause to breathe, each time you notice a thought without clinging to it, each time you let go of a label that no longer fits, you are stepping into freedom. Not a distant, unattainable freedom, but the simple, living freedom of being here, awake, aware, unburdened. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need to perfect yourself like a sculpture in a gallery. You only need to soften, to loosen the grip on the stories you've carried, to trust that who you truly are has never been a label or a role, but the open space in which life unfolds. The Buddha's invitation was never about escaping life. It was about entering it more fully, without fear, without armor, without the heavy weight of I am this or I am that. You are not your achievements. You are not your failures. You are not even the story you tell yourself when no one is listening. You are the living, breathing mystery that cannot be captured in words. Only lived, only loved. So today, and every day, may you walk lightly. May you live not as a fixed idea, but as a flowing presence. May you remember that true freedom was never somewhere far away. It has always been right beneath your feet, waiting only for you to see it.